So State of Decay 2 Update 34 has been announced, and the name is Curveballs, and we are looking at something super interesting, and I'd say even pretty game-changing, because this has the potential to change every single interaction you have in the game, period. I also have a big theory on future updates that I think can be massive, so definitely stick out towards the end of this video. But as far as the Curveball update and something you might see, for example, every single zombie you run into could explode on contact, and now killing that Zed with melee might not even be viable. You're gonna have to shoot it down, and if you don't have the bullets, you could be in trouble. This is just gonna be one example of what this new update might bring. But let's go ahead and start from the beginning on what this update's all about, and I'm gonna give you guys all the details on what the devs have said, and we'll try to answer as many questions in this video. Now, when this update goes live this fall, to start, this curveball mechanic is completely new, and it's gonna introduce really random elements into the game. For example, zombies might all of a sudden develop a new look and explode on impact, as I've shown before, and this can be good and bad. These curveballs can be something that can make it harder to deal with, like the zombies being harder to kill, or even making them completely weaker. I've highlighted this in previous videos where zombies can have something called soft skins, making them easier to kill. But not only that, it can affect every single zombie all around the entire map. You might even get completely new dynamic missions. For instance, on the PTR, I ended up getting one called the Lone Raider. This created a hostile raider who passively was stopping my entire supply chain of resources. So every day you might get a surplus of resources like extra food or whatever in your normal game, but this Lone Raider in itself, this curveball, was completely negating all of that. And on top of that, the only way for me to actually do anything about it was for me to go to his home and take him out, and I did. This can be very dangerous and lethal, as the NPCs can pretty much one-shot you. Another example, when I tested this over a month ago, I ended up getting a whole group of raiders, not just one, and that same effect went into play where they were stopping all my resources. So in a nutshell, this curveball mechanic is set to introduce a random set of elements into your game that will dynamically change your gameplay in either both positive or negative, or maybe even both at the same time. And for those who've always wanted wandering raiders, well, those examples I showed just kind of show maybe like a light version of that. I've also highlighted over the past 6 months how there's a completely new Black Plague Heart. Well, this curveball mechanic is essentially what will be spawning this Black Plague Heart that I fought previously, and I've mentioned is a lot harder to kill and a lot harder to deal with. I'll go over more examples in a little bit in this video, but for now, it seems like this is a way to really spice up the game and change a lot of different elements to your playthrough. Now, for those wondering, this mechanic will be completely optional, guys, so if you guys are turned off by this mechanic right now, and I'm sure some of you are, rest assured you will be able to turn this off. As a matter of fact, this is an endgame type of feature, as mentioned by the developers several times, and it will be balanced by your difficult settings. So if you're playing in the green zone or a lower difficulty, expect it not to be too crazy. And if you're in a middle difficulty, same thing. And if you're at the very highest difficulty like I typically play, you will definitely be getting the full brunt of both positive and negative curveballs. Another thing the developers have mentioned is that technically this doesn't make the game harder, but I gotta say that's not entirely true. If you get a really bad curveball, you can be in a lot of trouble. And at the same time, if you get a really positive one like weaker zombies, or where zombies can barely detect you at all, then that can make it really super easy even if you're at a high difficulty level. So there is kind of balance there. Keep in mind, the devs have said they are still tweaking the balance changes, and things can definitely change over time. Now, I'm going to quickly highlight more of what the developers have said in the live stream that happened about a week ago. If you start a new community, you won't see this until day 5, so you have a buffer. They also mentioned that this mechanic itself is more of an endgame mechanic, and that the way these curveballs will trigger will be a variety of things, from one simply just time being spent in the game and it'll just come randomly, or another is just actions in your game. Maybe you're doing some looting in a dangerous area, you could trigger a curveball. They're kind of keeping it a secret as to what specifically triggers what. They've also mentioned the morale of your community is going to be playing a big part in triggering curveballs, and so what I kind of took that as is that it meant if you have a super low morale and your community is on the verge of being destroyed and done for, you're probably not going to trigger anything that could potentially make the game harder in that moment, and then vice versa. If everything's going great in your community, you'll probably get a decent amount of these curveballs spawning. Another thing they mentioned is that you will see the same curveballs reappear, but they will come in different variations. For example, on the dev stream, they triggered a curveball that makes juggernauts way stronger and way more deadly. They have like superior sight and even superior smell, so you can't hide from them. And in this particular example, the juggernaut I think had increased sight as it highlighted its major effect, but actually this could have come in a more different variation, and the major effect that it could have highlighted was actually more damage, and that would have been highlighted by the purple overlay. So curveballs will repeat, but there's going to be different variations of them. Now for the UI for curveballs, this will come via the journal, and I'd say this is pretty self-explanatory and well done. When a curveball triggers, you'll actually hear from your community member that something's coming, and then it appears on the bottom left of this upcoming tab. At that point, some time will go by and it'll give you an opportunity to prepare yourself if it's something that needs preparing, and then it jumps into the active tab. Once it's in this tab, you'll get a full breakdown of what's going on within the game, whether it's positive or negative. You'll see this whole thing. Now in the past, when I've tested this mechanic and it was called Boons and Banes, now it's named Curveballs, there was actually a timer, and I think they said they got rid of it and they thought it would be more exciting for players not to know when something's gonna end. And I have to say, with the devs, and I know they're listening, I kind of have to disagree. I really liked having timers when I tested this, and giving a timer let me know I either needed to last only so much longer if something was hard, or if something was positive, it let me know I needed to move quickly to take advantage. I personally like timers, but if I'm the only person that likes it, then never mind. Definitely let me know in the comments what you guys think. But as I said, you get a full explanation on both the overview tab on the right, and in the middle there's even more details when a curveball is done and what's simply going on with it. And by the time it's done, it will go down to the ended tab. So overall, it's pretty intuitive and there's no complaints on my end about the UI on the curveball menu. Now let me highlight some of the curveballs that I've seen from my testing, and my most exciting one by far was the Black Plague Heart that I faced a few times. I won't give you guys more details about this, as I've talked about it a lot in previous videos, but essentially it's a harder Plague Heart to kill. But one thing that I would love to see is extra loot coming out of this, maybe the very best loot, maybe even make this an end game curveball, if that makes any sense. I would love this one to be something that only gets unlocked after you defeated and lasted through 30 curveballs and you get the ultimate one, for example, something like that. Something that we can work towards with this new feature. Now a new one that got triggered via the dev menus that I did was a bloaters exploding and killing everything around them. This one was really fun because you would take out everything nearby, but it was also very dangerous to you. As I've mentioned earlier, the Raider curveballs though was something that completely stopped my resources, which is really bad and lethal, and I have to say it was really fun to deal with because it really just added an extra element of danger you don't normally get in this game from other communities. But this other curveball I triggered was something called the Scavenger Hunt. This made it to where my community members actually went out by themselves and got me items. The problem was that this was slightly buggy because they kept bringing me nothing but snacks, which was kind of useless. I would love to see more different loot and fun loot, but this is a great example of a positive curveball that you can get. Some other positive curveballs are better food production and facility actions costing less. As I mentioned, zombies being easier to kill is going to be a big feature of these curveballs as well. So guys, there's a lot happening here with this feature and I like it, but I have to say a big part of me feels like, guys, and I hope I'm not being a downer here, what's kind of the point? That's why I mentioned earlier that I think it would be really cool to have an endgame curveball that kind of encompasses the whole thing. It's neat to have your game change in different ways, but we as gamers are definitely kind of wanting a carrot at the end of the stick. I sure like the idea of my game changing in different ways, but a big part of me, since this officially got announced, is asked kind of like, what's the point? Which I have to say is a little difficult in a game like this because this is a survival game, so getting rewards is kind of tricky. Maybe something like new achievements, new clothing types, or new weapons I think can go a long way alongside this feature. And something I really did like was the dynamic way of adding hostile groups to your map. I really think that adds a big element of fun and surprise. It just needs like, I guess like a little more carrot, but it's not too far away. And I really think this is a pretty amazing feature overall, and pretty like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's very unique and something that you wouldn't see in a survival game. Lastly, I have a really interesting thought. If you missed the announcements, the people who made this update was not Undead Labs, at least not fully. It was a team of developers from Wushu Studios, and a lot of the team working on the previous updates that were here before have moved on to State of Decay 3. So what does that mean? Well, that kind of means the possibilities of seeing some potential huge and big updates for this game is very much possible. If you've been following my State of Decay 3 news, you know that it looks like we won't see that game until 2025 at the minimum, leaving 2 years years still left to go. Well, you got to keep us hooked on the franchise somehow. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I hope we could see, and they've hinted that we could see a massive update, and with this whole new team working on State of Decay 2, it's very much possible. Could we see maybe a new map, new stories? Who knows? But during that live stream, they did hint that this is not the only big update coming in the future. They're still working on new things. So guys, if you're a fan of State of Decay 2 and you still want to see more updates, well, it looks like they got a lot of stuff cooking. As always, I'll try my best to keep you guys up to date, and if you want the latest on State of Decay 3, make sure you check out the video on the screen.